The nurse asked me who was coming to sit with me during chemo, and I didn't have an answer. My husband's mother had just texted me 4 words: "This isn't our problem." 4 words after 11 years of holidays, birthdays, and calling her mom. I sat in that plastic chair, bald head wrapped in a scarf, phone shaking in my hand, and realized the family I married into had already left the building. But what happened 3 days later, when my hospital room door opened, changed everything I thought I knew about who really loves you. Hi everyone, I'm Nicole Washington, and welcome back to the channel. If stories about real love, real betrayal, and real family hit something in you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because today's story is one of the most powerful ones I've ever had the honor of telling. Today, I'm going to take you through the story of a woman named Maya, a story about the family you're born into, the family you marry into, and the family you choose. Grab something warm to drink, settle in, because this one is going to move you. Let's begin. Maya Bennett was 34 years old when her life split into two halves, before and after. Before was ordinary in the most beautiful way. She'd married Daniel Bennett 9 years earlier, a kind-eyed architect with a laugh that filled up a room. They lived in a modest 3-bedroom house outside Charlotte, North Carolina, the kind of house with a porch swing that creaked in a way that felt like music instead of noise. They had 2 kids, Owen, 7, all elbows and energy, and Lily, 4, who still asked Maya to check under the bed for monsters every single night, even though Maya always told her gently, "There's nothing there, baby. I promise you, there's nothing there." Maya worked part-time as a dental hygienist 3 days a week so she could be home when the school bus dropped Owen off, so she could pack Lily's lunches with little notes tucked inside the napkin. She wasn't a woman who asked for much. She just wanted her small, steady life to keep being small and steady. Daniel's family lived 20 minutes away. His mother, Linda, his father, Robert, and his younger sister, Ashley, who had 2 kids of her own and a husband who worked construction. On the surface, they were a tight family. Sunday dinners at Linda's house, a big wooden table that sat 9 when you counted the folding chairs, laughter spilling out the kitchen window into the yard. Maya used to tell her own mother, half joking, "I got lucky. I actually like my in-laws." She would remember saying that for the rest of her life. Because sometimes the family you think has your back is only there for the good days. It's easy to love someone when loving them costs you nothing. It started with a shower. Maya was drying off on a Tuesday morning in March when her fingers brushed something that didn't belong, a small hardness beneath the skin near the underarm. She stood there for a long moment, towel dripping onto the bath mat, telling herself it was nothing. A cyst, a swollen gland, anything but the word already whispering itself in the back of her mind. She didn't tell Daniel that night. She told herself she'd get it checked first so she wouldn't worry him over nothing. 3 days later, sitting in a paper gown in a cold exam room, she watched her doctor's face change. Just slightly, just enough, while pressing gently at the spot with 2 fingers. And Maya knew, the way you know a storm is coming before the sky turns, that nothing wasn't the word coming for her. The biopsy took 8 days, 8 days of pretending, 8 days of packing lunches and helping with spelling words and lying next to Daniel at night, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, useless circles while her chest felt squeezed by a fist that never let go. The call came on a Thursday while she was folding laundry. "Mrs. Bennett," the voice said, gentle and rehearsed. "Dr. Reyes would like you to come in tomorrow morning to discuss your results in person." Maya sat down on the edge of the bed, a pair of Owen's socks still balled in her hand. "Can you just tell me now?" There was a pause. "Dr. Reyes really would prefer to go over everything with you face to face." That was the moment, Maya would later say. The after began. She was diagnosed with stage 2 invasive breast cancer 9 days later. Daniel cried when she told him, really cried, his shoulders shaking, his forehead pressed against hers as they sat on the kitchen floor because neither of them could figure out how to stand up under the weight of the word. He held her face in both hands and said, "We're going to fight this. Whatever it takes, Maya, I'm not going anywhere." For the first few weeks, he meant it. He came to every appointment. He held her hand during the port placement. He researched oncologists late into the night, tabs open on his laptop until 2 a.m., determined to find her the best care in the state. His family rallied too, at first. Linda brought over casseroles, Ashley set up a meal train with the neighbors. Robert, a man of few words, hugged Maya tighter than he ever had in 9 years and said, low and rough, "You're one of ours. We take care of ours." Maya remembers thinking, in the middle of the worst month of her life, that she was lucky, surrounded. She didn't know yet how quickly a family's love can become conditional the moment the sickness stops being new and starts being long. Chemotherapy began in May. The first round wasn't as bad as she'd feared. Exhausting, nauseating, but survivable, almost manageable if she just gritted her teeth through it. Daniel drove her to the infusion center and sat beside her, scrolling his phone, occasionally glancing up to check if she needed a blanket or ginger ale. It was the second round that changed something in him. Maybe it was watching her get sick in the bathroom at 3 a.m., or the clumps of thick dark hair coming away in her hairbrush, or simply the slow dawning realization that this wasn't going to be a short chapter. This was going to be months, maybe longer. This was going to touch every part of their life, their finances, their sleep, their children, their future, and there was no fast forwarding through it. Some people rise to that kind of test. Some, Maya would learn, quietly begin to shrink from it, an inch at a time, so slowly you don't notice the distance until you're standing on opposite shores. By the third round, Daniel had started working late more often. By the fourth, he'd stopped coming to appointments altogether, citing deadlines at the firm. "I'll be there for the important ones," he told her, not quite meeting her eyes. "They're all important, Daniel. I'm getting poison put into my body every 3 weeks." That's kind of the whole ball game. He didn't answer that. He just kissed her forehead and said he'd try to make the next one. He didn't. It was Linda who said the first cruel thing, though Maya wouldn't fully understand how cruel until much later, when the pattern had already revealed its full shape. Maya had lost her hair by June, all of it, down to fine, pale fuzz that made her look, she thought, like a baby bird that had fallen out of its nest too early. She wore scarves most days, sometimes a wig that itched and never quite sat right, and some days, too tired to care, nothing at all. She showed up bald to a Sunday dinner in July, too exhausted from round 5 to fuss with a wig, wearing an old soft cotton scarf Lily had picked out because it had little yellow flowers on it. Linda looked at her for a long moment when she walked in, then said in front of the whole table, in front of Ashley's kids, in front of Owen, "Maybe you should have worn the wig, honey. It's a little much for the dinner table." The table went quiet. Ashley shot her mother a look. Daniel said nothing, just stared down at his plate, jaw tight, and let the silence sit there instead of standing up for his wife. Maya excused herself to the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the closed toilet lid with her hand pressed over her mouth so no one would hear her cry. That was the first crack. There would be many more, each one small enough on its own to forgive. It was only later, looking back, that Maya could see them stacked together. A whole staircase of small cruelties she'd walked down without realizing where it led. By August, Maya was deep into her 6th round, and her body was breaking down in ways that terrified her. Her white blood cell counts kept crashing. She developed a fever that landed her in the ER at midnight. Daniel driving with white knuckles, both of them silent, both of them scared in ways they didn't know how to say out loud to each other anymore. She was hospitalized for 4 days. Neutropenic fever, the doctors called it. Her immune system so decimated by the chemo that a common infection had become a genuine threat to her life. Daniel came the first 2 days. On the 3rd day, he told her Linda needed him to help move furniture for Ashley, who was redoing her sunroom. On the 4th day, he sent a text, "Work emergency, can't get away. Call if you need anything." Maya stared at that text for a long time in her hospital bed, IV line taped to the back of her hand, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Call if you need anything, as if she wasn't lying in a hospital bed, alone, needing exactly the one thing he wasn't offering. Him. She didn't call her own mother that day. She was too proud, too exhausted, too unwilling to admit out loud that the marriage she'd built her whole adult life around was starting to hollow out from the inside. right when she needed it to hold. But her mother called her, because that's what mothers do. They feel it, even from 300 miles away, even without being told. Maya's mother, Carol, had raised her alone after Maya's father left when Maya was 6 years old, walked out one afternoon with 2 suitcases, and never really came back into the picture in any meaningful way. Carol had worked 2 jobs, cleaned houses on weekends, and put herself through community college at night to become a paralegal, all so that Maya and her younger brother Nate would have something steadier than what she'd had. Carol wasn't a woman who used a lot of words. She showed love in casseroles left on the porch, in showing up unannounced with a truck full of boxes on moving day, in driving 4 hours in the middle of the night without being asked twice. When Carol called that Thursday and Maya, worn down and lonely, finally let her voice crack. Just a little, just enough. Carol didn't ask a single follow-up question. "I'm coming," she said. "Mom, you don't have to. I'm coming, Maya. I'll be there by morning." And she was. Carol walked into that hospital room at 7:40 the next morning, still in her travel clothes, hair pulled back messy from the drive, carrying a canvas bag with Maya's favorite blanket from home tucked inside it, the one with the frayed satin edge Maya had slept with since she was a teenager. She didn't say anything dramatic. She just set the bag down, climbed carefully onto the edge of the hospital bed beside her daughter, the way she used to when Maya had nightmares as a little girl, and held her. "I've got you," Carol whispered into her bald scalp. "I've got you, baby. You're not doing this alone." Maya cried harder in that moment than she had during the entire diagnosis, not from sadness, from relief. The kind of relief that only comes when you realize, somewhere deep in your bones, that you are not, in fact, as alone as you've been quietly terrified you were. Things didn't get better with Daniel's family. If anything, they got worse, in the slow, creeping way betrayal often does. Not one dramatic explosion, but 100 small absences stacking on top of each other until the whole structure gives way. Ashley stopped texting to check in. The meal train quietly dried up after the second week. Robert started finding reasons not to make eye contact when she came to family gatherings, as if her illness embarrassed him, as if it were contagious in some way he couldn't quite name but still somehow feared. And Daniel began to change in ways that broke something fundamental in Maya, piece by piece. He started sleeping in the guest room, telling her it was because he didn't want to disturb her rest, though Maya suspected it was because he could no longer look at her changed body without something like grief crossing his face. Dinner conversations became logistics. Who was picking up Owen from soccer? Whether Lily's dentist appointment needed rescheduling, as if Maya's cancer were an inconvenient scheduling conflict rather than a fight for her life happening in the very same house they shared. It came to a head in September, 3 days before her double mastectomy. Maya had asked Daniel gently if he could take the day off for the surgery and stay the first night at the hospital with her, the way the surgeon had recommended a support person do. Daniel hesitated, just a beat too long, before saying, "I'll try. My mom actually asked if I could help her and my dad with something that day. I don't know, Maya. It's been a lot, you know. Everyone's kind of stretched thin." Something in Maya went very still and very cold. "Everyone stretched thin," she repeated slowly. "Daniel, I am about to have both of my breasts removed. I'm having chemo poison flushed through my body every 3 weeks. I'm scared every single night that I'm not going to see my kids grow up. And you're telling me your family is stretched thin?" He didn't answer. He just looked at the floor, the same way he had that Sunday at his mother's table when Linda had humiliated her in front of everyone. That same silent, cowardly refusal to choose her. 2 nights before her surgery, she got the text from Linda. 4 words, cruel in their brevity, colder than anything Maya could have imagined a mother-in-law of 9 years capable of writing. "This isn't our problem." Maya sat on the edge of her bed staring at the screen, the blue light illuminating her bald head in the dark room, and something inside her simply broke open. She wasn't crying anymore. She was past crying. She felt in that moment an eerie kind of clarity, the sensation of watching a house she'd lived in for 9 years quietly burn down around her, and finally understanding that no one inside it was coming to put out the fire. The morning of her surgery, Daniel drove her to the hospital in silence. He walked her to pre-op, kissed her forehead the way you'd kiss a coworker goodbye at the end of a shift, and said, "I'll be back to pick you up tomorrow. I've got the kids and Mom needs help with something in the afternoon." Maya looked at him, really looked at him, this man she'd married at 25 in a backyard under string lights, this man who'd once promised in front of both their families that he would love her in sickness and in health. And she said quietly, "Okay, Daniel." Not "please stay," not "I need you," just "okay." Because somewhere in the last 6 months, she had learned the hardest lesson of her life. You cannot beg someone into showing up for you. He left. The surgery was 5 hours long. Maya woke up in recovery groggy, aching, chest wrapped in bandages, drains taped to her sides, utterly alone in a curtained-off bay, listening to the murmur of nurses and machines beeping around her. The nurse who checked her vitals that evening asked gently, "Do you have someone coming to stay with you tonight, hun?" Maya, throat dry, voice barely above a whisper, said, "I don't know." And that was the truth of it. Her husband was at his mother's house. Her in-laws had made it clear in the coldest 4 words imaginable that her fight wasn't theirs to carry. And her own mother was 300 miles away, having already used up so many of her vacation days driving down during the neutropenic fever scare that Maya hadn't wanted to ask her to come again, not on top of everything else Carol had already sacrificed. She lay there in that hospital bed that night, IV line beeping softly, chest throbbing with a pain that was both physical and something so much deeper, and she thought, for the first time in her whole life, that she understood what it meant to feel truly, completely alone. She was wrong. She just didn't know it yet. The door to her hospital room opened at 9:47 the next morning. Maya, half asleep, groggy from the pain medication, turned her head toward the sound, expecting a nurse. It wasn't a nurse. It was her mother, Carol, still in her work clothes, having left directly from her paralegal job the moment she found out, because Ashley, of all people, had quietly texted Carol the night before. "I think somebody needs to know Maya's alone at the hospital. Nobody in this family is showing up for her, and it's not right. I'm sorry." It was the one decent thing Ashley did in the whole ordeal, and even then, she hadn't had the courage to show up herself. Behind Carol was Nate, Maya's younger brother, carrying a duffel bag and a stack of magazines because he didn't know what else to bring and figured a distraction couldn't hurt. And behind them both, Maya's breath caught in her throat, was her father. Her father, who had walked out when she was 6, who she had spoken to maybe a dozen times in the last 20 years, mostly stilted phone calls on birthdays that trailed off into awkward silence. Her father, whom she had stopped expecting anything from a long, long time ago, standing in the doorway of a hospital room, hat in his weathered hands, eyes wet, looking like a man who had been carrying a debt for 28 years and had finally decided to try, in whatever broken way he could, to pay some small piece of it back. "Dad?" Maya's voice cracked. He stepped forward slowly, like he wasn't sure he had the right to be there, like he expected her to tell him to leave. "Your mama called your brother, and your brother called me," he said, voice rough. "I know I got no right showing up now after everything, I know that. But I heard my little girl was lying in a hospital bed alone, and I couldn't—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I couldn't let that happen, not while I was still breathing and had legs that could drive me here." Maya, chest bandaged, drains taped to her sides, tears sliding freely down her face now, reached her hand out toward him. It was the smallest gesture. It meant everything. He crossed the room and took her hand in both of his, careful, like she was something precious and breakable, and pressed his forehead gently against her knuckles. "I'm here now," he said. "I know it's late, but I'm here now." That day, Maya's hospital room, which had felt like the loneliest place in the world just 12 hours earlier, filled up with the kind of noise that only real love makes. Carol unpacked snacks she'd grabbed at a gas station on the drive down because she knew Maya wouldn't be able to eat hospital food. Nate set up a portable speaker and played Maya's favorite old playlist low in the background, the songs they used to blast in his beat-up Honda Civic when they were teenagers. Her father sat in the corner chair, quiet for most of the day, but present in a way he had never once managed to be during Maya's entire childhood, and somehow that presence, imperfect and decades late as it was, felt like it was patching something in her chest that had been cracked since she was 6 years old. At one point, Carol leaned over and adjusted Maya's blanket, tucking it in around her shoulders the exact same way she used to when Maya was small and sick with the flu. "You're not alone," Carol said, her voice fierce and steady. "Not for one more second of this. You hear me? Whatever that family does or doesn't do, you have us. You have always had us, and we are not going anywhere." Maya nodded, unable to speak through the lump in her throat, and let herself, for the first time in months, simply be held. Daniel showed up around 6 that evening, expecting an empty room and a quietly resentful wife he could manage the way he'd been managing her, with just enough presence to avoid outright guilt, never quite enough to actually be there. Instead, he walked into a room full of people. Carol, arms crossed, eyes sharp as flint when they landed on him. Nate standing up slowly, jaw set. Maya's father, quiet but unmistakably present, watching the son-in-law who had let his daughter lie in a hospital bed alone the night after major surgery. Daniel started, clearly thrown off balance. "I didn't realize everyone would be. I would have come earlier if I'd known." "You knew when the surgery was, Daniel," Carol said, voice low and controlled in a way that was somehow more frightening than shouting would have been. "You've known for 3 weeks. Nobody had to tell you your wife needed you." Daniel looked at Maya, silently pleading for her to smooth this over the way she always had. But Maya just looked back at him, exhausted, aching, and for the first time in a long time, completely clear-eyed. "You should go," she said quietly. "I'm okay. I have people here." The words landed harder than she expected them to, not because they were cruel, because they were true. "I have people here. Not you're one of my people, just people, a family that had shown up when it mattered, standing in the space he had left empty." Daniel left without saying much else. Maya didn't watch him go. She was too busy letting her father tuck a second pillow behind her back, too busy listening to her brother make a bad joke that made her laugh for the first time in days, even though laughing hurt her healing incisions. Recovery was long. Radiation followed the surgery, 5 days a week for 6 weeks, and by then, something in Maya's marriage had quietly, irreversibly ended, even though the paperwork wouldn't catch up to that truth for another several months. Daniel moved out in November into a small apartment 10 minutes from his mother's house, which Maya found darkly, painfully fitting. He tried, in fits and starts, to explain himself, said he'd been overwhelmed, said he didn't know how to handle watching her suffer, said his family had always been complicated about illness because his own grandmother had died a long, difficult death when he was a teenager, and it had left some kind of scar in the Bennett family, a collective instinct to flee rather than face suffering head-on. Maya listened to all of it, and in the end, she said something she'd been turning over in her mind for weeks. "I understand fear, Daniel. I do. I was terrified too, every single day, but I didn't get to run from it. I didn't get a choice to leave the room when it got hard. You did, and you chose to leave it over and over again when I needed you the most. I can forgive that someday maybe, but I can't build a life on it." He didn't argue. Somewhere underneath the excuses, he already knew she was right. The divorce was finalized the following spring, right around the time Maya's oncologist told her, with a smile Maya would remember for the rest of her life, that her latest scans were clean, no evidence of disease. She sat in that little exam room, hairless still, though soft new growth was starting to show at her scalp, fine and dark like duckling down, and she cried the kind of tears that come from somewhere so deep they don't even feel like sadness or joy. Just release. Just the sound of a body finally allowed to put down a weight it had been carrying for a year. She called her mother first. "It's clean, Mom," she said, voice shaking. "I'm clean." Carol, on the other end of the line, made a sound that was half sob, half laugh, and said, "I never doubted it. Not for one single day." She called her father next. He didn't say much, he never did, but Maya could hear him crying softly on the other end. And for a man who had spent 28 years mostly absent, those quiet tears said more than any speech could have. She called Nate, who immediately started planning a celebration dinner with far too much enthusiasm, insisting on making his terrible attempt at lasagna because, in his words, this calls for a truly mediocre home-cooked meal, sis. I'm not letting anyone else steal my moment. She didn't call Linda. She didn't call Ashley. She didn't call Robert. She didn't need to. That door had quietly closed on its own the night she lay alone in a hospital bed, and no one from that family thought to walk through it. It's been 2 years now since that clean scan. Maya still gets checkups every 6 months, still holds her breath a little in the waiting room until the doctor walks in smiling. Owen is 9 now, tall for his age, still all elbows and energy. Lily is 6, and she still occasionally asks Maya to check under the bed for monsters, though these days it's mostly out of habit rather than real fear. Maya rebuilt her life slowly, the way you rebuild anything after a fire, carefully, piece by piece, keeping only what still felt solid enough to hold weight. Carol moved 20 minutes away the year after the divorce, insisting she was just ready for a change of scenery, though everyone in the family knew the real reason. She wanted to be close enough to show up in 15 minutes, not 4 hours, if her daughter ever needed her again. Maya's father calls every Sunday now. Sometimes the conversations are still a little stilted, still carrying the awkward weight of 2 decades of missed years between them. But he calls every single Sunday without fail, and that consistency Maya has learned matters more than any grand gesture ever could have. Nate is, predictably, the world's most involved uncle, showing up to Owen's soccer games with an air horn that Maya has begged him unsuccessfully to retire. And Maya, when she talks about that year now, the diagnosis, the chemo, the surgery, the slow unraveling of a marriage she thought would last forever, doesn't talk about it with bitterness anymore. She talks about it instead as the year she learned the truest lesson of her life. Family isn't the people whose last name you share. It isn't the people who show up for the easy years, the birthday parties, and the holiday dinners, and the photos everyone smiles for. Family is who shows up when there's nothing easy left to offer. When you're bald and scared and stitched together with drains taped to your sides, lying in a hospital bed at midnight, wondering if anyone is coming. Family is the mother who drives through the night without being asked twice. The brother who plays your favorite songs low in the background because he doesn't know what else to do with his own helpless love. The father who walks into a room he has no right to walk into, hat in his hands, 28 years too late, and says simply, "I'm here now." Maya says it changed the way she measures love entirely. Not by the promises people make at the altar or the Sunday dinners they host or the meal trains they start with good intentions. She measures it now by who is still standing there, hand outstretched when everything easy about loving you has burned away. And all that's left is the hard, quiet, unglamorous work of simply staying. That, Maya says, is the only kind of love worth building a life around. And these days, surrounded by the family who never once made her question whether she was worth showing up for, she finally has exactly that. If this story moved you the way it moved me while I was telling it, let me know in the comments. Has your real family ever shown up when you least expected it or when you needed them most? I read every single one of your stories, and honestly, they're what keep this channel going. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story. This is Nicole Washington, signing off. Take care of the people who take care of you.